All right, Joshua and Benjamin, you gave us a lot to think about. You both taught us about the moment when the Israelites crossed the sea to freedom. Benjamin, you captured that frightful experience of standing between Pharaoh's army and the sea. And Joshua, you captured that later frightful moment of finding themselves in the wilderness and not trusting that they would have what they need to survive. Benjamin, you asked really hard questions about the story. Why did God favor the Jews? What makes us better? Why didn't God just soften Pharaoh's heart and make the Egyptians kind instead of hardening Pharaoh's heart? First of all, I want to say that I do not believe that God does favor the Jewish people over others, or that we're better than anyone else. I believe that God will always stand on the side of the oppressed, of the victimized, of the enslaved. And God will always stand against tyrants and against tyranny. And I believe that we Jews are uniquely chosen to receive and live Torah. And other peoples are uniquely chosen for other callings. In response to the question of the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, you gave a complex and beautiful answer about God's investment in the Jewish people long term, about our need to become united and strong and able to withstand great hardship, to face our fears and to begin to trust God. That is an excellent answer. I have a different answer, which is that Pharaoh hardened his own heart for many years before the plagues even began and during the plagues. And that it was in our interest to believe that Pharaoh's cruel and terrible actions were all part of God's puppeteering. But sometimes tyrants are just tyrants. Sometimes humans with great power do evil, as Vladimir Putin is doing now. And it is not part of God's plan. That feels very important to me. Now, Joshua, Benjamin's answer about God hardening Pharaoh's heart in order to build trust with the Israelites long term touches on your question. Why didn't the people trust God? Especially after God split the sea and drowned the Egyptians and brought them to freedom and gave them manna and water. Why were they so ready to doubt God's motives and God's power when they'd just witnessed the greatest miracle of all time to effect their liberation? It seems that manna itself is meant to be an education in trust. The people are used to being afraid. They are used to powerful forces acting against them with no regard for their safety or their lives. As you said, Joshua, you could relate, you could understand, not that you could relate, but you could understand what it would feel like for them to have emerged from 400 years of slavery, having been in the dark about what's supposed to happen next, doubting the benevolence of any power, having just been abused so. As Shai Held teaches, one of the many things Pharaoh has taken from them is the ability to trust. The way manna works is completely foreign to the Israelites, who are used to being anxious about whether they will have enough to eat or what they need. Manna falls every day in the wilderness, except on Shabbat. When you go out to gather the manna for yourself and your family, you are only to take what you need. If you take too much, it will shrink to be exactly what you need. If you take too little, it will expand to be enough. If you try to hoard it for the future, it will rot or be infested with worms the next day. Except for on the day before Shabbat, when there's a double portion for every person, and on Shabbat, you don't have to gather anything because you have enough. God says, quote, "I will rain down bread for you from the sky, and the people shall go out and gather each day that day's portion, that I may test them to see whether they will follow my instructions or not." Can the Israelites trust God enough to follow this plan? To not take more than they need? To give up their anxiety about whether they'll have enough tomorrow? Can the people learn a new way of relating to the world? To believe and expect that they will have what they need? That it will be enough? Can they learn that feeling of having enough, of not worrying anymore, of trust? Well, this test doesn't go well. They take too much, they try to hoard it, they try to gather it on Shabbat, they do every single thing they're not supposed to do. And it's clear that this lesson is going to take a very long time to learn. God instructs Aaron to take an omer of the manna and to put it in a jar. This is a part of the story that doesn't get enough emphasis. God tells Aaron to take an omer, a measure of the manna, and to put it in a jar, and to put the jar in front of the ark, in front of all the people, quote, to be kept throughout the ages, in order that they may see the bread that I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Biblical scholar Victor Hamilton says, before the ark receives the tablets of the covenant, it receives a jar. Scripture first tells us about a God of manna before it tells us about a God of mandates, a God who graciously provides before a God who lays down the law. We still have not learned this lesson, that God graciously provides all we need. Bread doesn't fall from the sky for us, but it does grow from the ground. And there can easily be enough for everyone on earth. There is no need to fight over it, to hoard it, to covet what someone else has, to take it from others, to be afraid that there won't be enough for all. Our fear of scarcity leads to scarcity. If we were to learn the very lesson of the manna, and we were to choose to give up our collective anxiety about not having enough, we could choose to distribute the food on the planet in such a way that every person would have enough. This is actually an easy problem to solve. It is not difficult at all. It is just a matter of will. It is just a decision we could make. If we wanted to make sure that every person had a home, we could simply decide to make that so. We have the resources. It is not a matter of resources. It is just a decision. Benjamin, you talked to us about the massive humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. A few weeks ago, I went to the Poland-Ukraine border on an aid mission with UJA. And I can tell you from my experience that the overwhelming scenes of human suffering are very reminiscent of our own people's near destruction in that very place. I was haunted by those images and memories everywhere we went. And seeing so many people who had lost their homes and had nowhere to sleep was shocking. But also, I was aware that I had grown up in a country accustomed to seeing people sleeping on sidewalks and outside of buildings and on the floor of entryways and under bridges and in train stations, people with nothing. Homelessness has become normal in our country. It was new when I was a child. I am that old. But it has become normal. We have allowed it to become normal. There are societies with no hunger. There are societies with no homelessness, just not ours. We have built our society based on scarcity on purpose. We have built a society that encourages fear and anxiety about basic sustenance on purpose. We believe that people should have to earn what they have, that people should have to struggle, that people should not be allowed to be idle, to receive without effort. This is a choice. It is true that fear and anxiety are effective motivators, but they also have immeasurable cost. There is an utterly inadequate safety net in this country. Many of us know in the back of our minds that a set of circumstances could leave us without what we need. Loss of job and income, a crashed market, illness, disability, or even just getting old. If you can't pay your mortgage or rent, you will lose your home. If you don't have income, you don't have food. There is no manna. It does not have to be like this. We could decide instead that everyone should have the basics no matter what. And we could build free enterprise on top of that foundation. That would be entirely possible. And if we were not anxious, if we were not afraid for ourselves, we would be so much more able to do what you want us to do, Joshua. To look toward others, to reach outward, to connect, to care. This is the lesson that the second part of our parsha is trying to teach us. This is what freedom is supposed to look like. Trusting that we have enough so that we can make sure that everyone has enough. And to go back to the first part of the parsha, the part you spoke about, Benjamin, there's a moment between Pharaoh's army and the sea when the people become very afraid and say something almost parallel. Why did you bring us out here to die? We could have just stayed home in Egypt. And Moses responds by telling the people that God is about to perform a great miracle and all they have to do is be still. But God rebukes Moses in that moment, saying, don't cry out to me. Tell the people to go forward. This moment is a reminder of another aspect of what it means to be free. We are not to be passive spectators waiting for God to save us. We are to act, to take responsibility for the conditions we find ourselves in, to go forward to save ourselves. As the Talmud tells us in Tractate Yoma, we do not rely on miracles. Even at the edge of the sea, this was the message from God. Do not rely on miracles. Go forward. Make choices. Take responsibility. Do what must be done. This is what freedom is. Shabbat shalom.